Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the marketplace. Coming up, World Bank raises alarm oil prices could hit $150 a barrel as a result of the escalating Israel-Hamas conflict. How realistic is this projection? We will discuss. Also coming up, British Airways is ruling out any plan to move all its Heathrow-Accra Heathrow flights to Gatwick. We have an exclusive with Chief of Planning and Strategy at British Airways, Neil Alan Chernoff.
To sort of start the route from, let's say, Gatwick and move the Heathrow route over to Gatwick.
Also coming up, Bank of Ghana reveals more investors have expressed interest in the country's fintech sector due to the tremendous improvement in the fight against money laundering and financing of terrorism.
And that we weed out potential risks in the space. It doesn't mean that we say the space is full of risks. No, risks is dynamic, and therefore we always have to keep abreast with development in the space.
My name is Daryl. Thanks for being with us. Details coming up. Thanks for staying with us, everyone. We are going to shoot straight to our first story for this afternoon to do with fuel prices and a projection by the World Bank. Well, the World Bank, in its October 2023 commodity market outlook, has indicated or warned that the Hamas-Israel conflict could escalate oil prices. It has identified the possibility of oil prices surging beyond $150 a barrel, a scenario that could lead to significant increases in both energy and food prices, reminiscent of the price spikes witnessed a year earlier due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Energy strategist, also CEO of Eureka Solutions, Dr. Yusuf Suleimana, joins me on Zoom to discuss this. Good afternoon to you. I remember we talked about this some weeks ago when the conflict started. I feared that the prices could hit $100 a barrel for crude oil, but the World Bank is projecting $150. How seriously should we take these concerns from the World Bank?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to you, Daryl, and good afternoon to your cherished viewers in Ghana and across the globe. Thank you for having me once again. Indeed, as we rightly mentioned the last time, these projections are not out of place, and it is something that policymakers will have to stand by and plan ahead of time. And the reason being that if you look at the historical antecedents following Israel and Palestine conflicts, what I said the last time, I said with the current, conflict and the way it is, if it stays as it is within these brackets as the usual Hamas, Israel conflict, then we're not going to see any impact on global oil prices at this moment. However, I did mention the last time that if you should have miscalculations, when I talk about miscalculations, it could be unintended consequences where we have escalation that nobody has even expected, which will translate into a regional conflict. And as we speak now, that we are gravitating towards that. All regional players are on high alert. If it tends to Israel-Arab conflict, then that becomes serious. And if you remember, I told you a situation that happened in the 1970s. That was a serious situation that we don't want to bring ourselves in to think about. What happened then was the fact that it was similar conflict. In fact, that took regional dimensions where all the Arabs came together and they did what they call a phenomenal oil embargo. Oil embargo means that OPEC guys said they were not going to export oil to the West, and oil quickly moved from $3 to $12, almost 200%. And I mentioned that if it justifies that what we have now, I don't think the global energy community is ready for any oil prices in the 3 decades, because as we speak now, even oil in the 90s, we are struggling to cope with inflationary pressure. And so yes, Russia crisis the premium is not fully over. In fact, that's actually accountable for why oil is in the 90s. And if we should have this conflict escalation to proportion that is unimaginable, then we're going to have a double whammy, and I don't think the global energy community may be ready for that. Daryl.
Talk to us about the implications should the Israel-Hamas conflict escalate, and should prices reach $150 a barrel, as the World Bank is projecting.
Yeah, that's going to be huge, especially vulnerable economies like the global south economies, the developing nations, African continent, and other developing nations, because we are mostly import-dependent nations. And so we're going to have it in two perspectives. Number one, those who are heavily dependent on oil imports or petroleum product imports, and we have any disruption in the flow from the east to the west, that's going to be huge, and prices are going to skyrocket. Pump prices is something that we cannot arrest, and that will translate to inflationary pressures. That's number one point of it. That's the direct impact. The indirect impact, again, when this thing happen, and probably because it's a global phenomenon, all economies will put in measures to be able to stem the tide. And if you remember, the Western world, what I call the global North economies, they are not going to relent on the effort to put a cap on inflationary pressures. And what they do is that they will go back to increase in policy rates. And rather, when policy rates within these global North economies increases, their currencies get strengthened. And when their currencies get strengthened, the direct impact on our own currencies is going to be dire. So that's what I'm saying, these two folds. If we have inflationary pressures going, we're going to be impacted within our pumps. If you have currency, fluctuations in terms of these global North economies, such as US and the European Union, they increase the policy rate, their currencies are going to be strengthened, and that will have a huge impact on our currencies. And you can imagine, if you look at what the consumer pays at the pump, the currency or the exchange rate is a key factor, and then the commodity price is a key factor. So if exchange rates will not work to our favor, and the commodity prices will not also work to our favor, I think it's going to be huge. And Daryl, I'll mention one other thing. What the global community may be missing is the fact that this kind of conflicts could have impact on a global choke point we call the Strait of Hormuz. Our Strait of Hormuz controls about 20% to 30% of the global hydrocarbon flow from the Middle East to the West. And this area is very critical. And if this conflict escalates, we don't pray that it goes to that extent. But if it escalates, this is controlled by Iran and other players. In fact, it is in between the Middle Eastern countries. So if it escalates and that global choke point is blocked, that is going to be zero. We are just hoping that things shouldn't escalate to this point. But I can say that we have to be very careful, and we have to just pray that cool heads actually will prevail, that this conflict will come to an end as soon as possible.
So the World Bank in that report recommends that policymakers in developing countries take measures to manage the potential increase in headline inflation. It also advises against trade restrictions such as export bans on food and fertilizers. These measures can often intensify price volatility and heighten food insecurity. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, that's factual. And I will always say that as much as this global geopolitics are remote, the cascading impact on every local economy will be dire if it does take the heavy toll on the economies. And yes, that I always say that Africa and African continent, Ghana per se, our vulnerability is our excessive dependence on external, importation of commodities. So what we need to do is that the World Bank is spot on that. They are just telling us that we have to be self-reliant, and we mentioned it severally. They also mentioned of this trade route. If you remember the last time, I mentioned the fact that Ghana is a host to what we call AFTAC. AFTAC has been formed for how many years? And I think the impact is not being felt now. So what I would urge is that we have the right conduit, and AFTAC is number one. If you have AFTAC and it works very well, then trade barriers are broken, trade barriers are seamlessly, trade restrictions are seamlessly removed. I think it's going to have a lot. So if we begin to trade among ourselves, most of this external impact, we're not going to feel it. And that I guess I'm so surprised that African continent will trade more with external parties than we trade among ourselves. What is wrong with us? I think that's a problem there. We need to look into that. And so, yes, the way out, the credible conduit out of this quagmire, whenever it hits, whenever it does take hold, the center hold within the global economy, will be to be self-reliant. And we have every opportunity to do that. Let's have refineries. Let's not depend too much on importation. If we have refineries, that will help. If we make use of conduit like African Development Bank and the rest, I think this is our best bet. And if you do them and make them work and work well, rather, most of this external impact, we're not going to feel them that much.
Dr. Issy Suleiman, thank you so much. Energy strategist, also CEO of Eureka Solutions and energy consultancy firm. I appreciate your time with us. Now, let's turn to air travel. British Airways is ruling out any plan to move all its Heathrow flights to Gatwick following the introduction of the Gatwick route 3 times a week. British Airways in 2021 announced a decision to move flights from the premium Heathrow Airport to Gatwick, a decision that was seriously rejected by the government. There are fears that this new Gatwick operation is part of a grand scheme to return to that plan that was abolished. But in an exclusive interview with Joy Business in London, Chief of Planning and Strategy at British Airways, Neil Alan Chernoff, said there was no such plan on the table.
Ultimately, what we were looking to do was to be able to grow our capacity between London and Ghana. And by adding those 3 additional frequencies, we were able to increase our seats by about 35%. And in fact, we've already announced that in April of next year, we're going to go to 4 weekly flights instead of 3. And so we'll see an additional 55% increase in seat capacity. For us, when we're looking to add routes and whatever that destination is, I mean, ultimately, we look at, one, where do we have aircraft available, and is there something unique that we can provide by serving a destination from multiple airports? One of the biggest challenges we've had as we've been recovering from the pandemic was we grounded our 747 fleet. We currently have 12 less long-haul aircraft than we had pre-pandemic, and so often finding aircraft to be able to grow is really challenging for us. One of the advantages that we thought about offering the additional flights from Gatwick was if you actually look at where individuals who are flying to Accra to visit friends and family, tourism, business, or individuals from Ghana who are visiting London. There's various parts of London into which those individuals are traveling, and there's actually a large community of people where Gatwick Airport is actually more convenient for them than Heathrow. And so I think the benefit of offering that dual airport is, one, the importance of the flight to London allows us to provide some pretty unique connectivity to the United States and Canada. With Gatwick, although we do have less connectivity there, we do have a short-haul operation there, and that can provide connections to more tourist destinations around Europe. And so we think those two offer kind of a balance of choice for customers.
So I get it right, more of trying to offer connectivity to a lot of Ghanaians who are living in that part of London to connect to Accra.
Yeah, and like I said, if you look at kind of various areas where people either originate or may be visiting in London, there is a certain part and a large group of people who actually Gatwick is a much more convenient airport, and that is not necessarily, we do that across our network. As an example, we offer lots of flights to New York from London, but we also offer a flight from Gatwick because for some individuals that's a more convenient airport. Similar thing to Cape Town, similar thing to Las Vegas, to Orlando, and so it is something we do across the system.
Let's talk about price, and I know that for you it's about the routes. Price could be another responsibility, but again, what is the price difference? If I'm flying to Heathrow and Gatwick, is there any differential in terms of pricing, or it's virtually the same? For some normal passenger, they'll be thinking about price being a major decision in taking that decision to fly or not to fly.
Yeah. Look, I think price is very dynamic in the market. It depends what other airlines are offering a price, and also very dependent on supply and demand. Now, it is true that Gatwick as an airport is a less expensive airport in which to fly into, and so the cost that passengers or airlines pay at that airport is much less than Heathrow. Heathrow is one of the most expensive airports in the world, and ultimately that does end up in the ticket price. You probably would, Air Mauritius recently moved their flight from Heathrow to Gatwick, and maybe part of that was around that. But one of the other things too is that if you look at the aircraft that we fly, so we're flying the 350 from Heathrow, and we're flying a 777 from Gatwick. That 777 has more economy seats. It's less premium heavy, and so that should offer kind of more access, particularly for those who are trying to fly into economy, better pricing because there'll be more seats in the market for them.
So I get the fact that if someone is flying from Gatwick to Accra, it will be less expensive than flying from Heathrow to Accra.
Well, I think, like I said, pricing is very dynamic and it depends a bit on demand. But because if you look at the way, ultimately what in an airline price is what the airline charges, but then what the airport charges on top of that. And what the airport charges on top of that is less expensive at Gatwick than at Heathrow.
You mentioned Air Mauritius moving from Heathrow to Gatwick. For a lot of Ghanaians and for people who are flying from Accra to London, there's a history, and they are worried about your plan to offer more options for people who are flying to London. They fear that there could be a future plan where people who are flying from Accra to London will lose the Heathrow route. And there's a history. And so how do you diffuse those who are worried about the fact that maybe there is a grand plan in the future that people flying from Accra to London will lose the access to the Heathrow route?
Look, I can guarantee there is no plan to sort of start the route from, let's say, Gatwick and move the Heathrow route over to Gatwick. We've been flying to Ghana for 86 years. I looked that up recently. And look, there was a time, this goes back, I believe, 2 years ago, where we looked to move the Heathrow route to Gatwick. And at the time, that was because we were very, very constrained on capacity at Heathrow. And as we were trying to balance how can we utilize our aircraft at Gatwick, utilize our aircraft at Heathrow, we had looked at making that move. And one thing that Gatwick tends to work well is if there are more point-to-point passengers, because we do offer less connectivity than Heathrow.
All right, we're moving on from there to other stories for you this afternoon. The Bank of Ghana has revealed that more investors have expressed interest in the country's fintech sector due to the tremendous improvement in the fight against money laundering and financing of terrorism. According to the Deputy Director in charge of Fintech and Innovation at the Bank of Ghana, Clarence Blay, the central bank is taking steps to prune down such activities within the fintech space.
Figures released by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime have shown that money laundering transactions are estimated to cost economies between $1 to $3 trillion annually, representing 2 to 5% of global GDP. To this end, the central bank says it will continue to intensify its sensitization programs for fintech companies to drive more investors to the sector. Clarence Blay is the Deputy Director, Fintech and Innovation Office at the Bank of Ghana.
As Ghanaians begin to trust and adopt fintech solutions to access financial service, it is important that we weed out potential risks in the space. It doesn't mean that we say the space is full of risks. No, risks is dynamic, and therefore we always have to keep abreast with development in the space by engaging with stakeholders to make sure that we come together, discuss issues, and take preemptive measures to avert potential risks in the AML CFT space. A lot of investors also have shown interest in the Ghanaian fintech ecosystem.
Speaking to Joy Business at a capacity building workshop for fintechs, Chief Executive Officer of Financial Intelligence Center, Kwawu, said although there's been some tremendous improvements in anti-money laundering activities, they will continue to enhance sensitization programs for players within the financial space to counter the menace.
We have to be serious with the fintech sector, and that's why we are meeting them to let them know, the work at hand, so that together we can do the job. We are now sensitizing them. In fact, they don't seem to have any much idea when it comes to AML CFT. So we are now sensitizing them, and this is the maiden meeting. And like I said, it's not going to be the first time. In fact, we'll keep meeting them. To ensure that they have a grip over the AML CFT issues.
The workshop brought together various players within the fintech sector.
Now, green startups have been entreated to position themselves to attract funds from financial institutions. According to Deputy Operations Manager for GCS Ghana Limited, Josephine Ofe, this can be done through the establishment of proper structures. She spoke to Joy Business at the 2023 Ghana Green Tech Forum.
There's a lot of challenge with regards to getting funding for such businesses. Many often their plight gets unnoticed, because a lot of funding organizations are quite often focused on other projects rather than when it comes to farming or it comes to recycling and things like that. And so we are hoping that this event will throw more light on the fact that the earth is ours. This is where we live, and any innovation technology that people have developed, that is helping us to have a better ecosystem to live in, should be given the attention and possibly even given the support to get funding for their business or initiative. Positioning, I'll say that the organization being able to position themselves to attract the right type of funding. So in terms of documentation, in terms of branding, getting them informed about how they can well align their initiative business organizations such that they are able to attract the needed support.
Now, the Department of Animal Science at the University of Ghana has commenced a trial on the adaptability and growth performance of some 5 dual-purpose chicken breeds under the farmer management systems. The project, dubbed the Tropical Poultry Genetic Solution, is a 2-year genetics innovation strategy that seeks to test and identify high-producing farmer-preferred chicken genotypes. The initiative aims at reducing poverty while strengthening food and nutrient security for rural households. Here's more in this report.
Despite Ghana's poultry industry suffering varied setbacks in recent years, the demand for poultry products is on ascendancy. Reports suggest about 80% of local poultry keepers depend on indigenous scavenging chickens, which have low meat and egg producing potential. Under the Tropical Poultry Genetic Solution project, the Department of Animal Science, University of Ghana, is experimenting with new poultry breed for higher production performance. Ricky Abajipoku is the deputy project lead.
The performance of these local indigenous chickens are quite poor in terms of productivity. Small body weight, give you fewer eggs, even though they are adaptive to the environment. So there was the need to research into how best we can improve these breeds, local breeds, blend them with some of the commercial, and then get good performing birds. But when you do those engineering, you need to do some trial on field, because you've done the engineering all right, but it might not necessarily work on the field. You understand? So there was the need for us to do this field trial to see the adaptiveness of these new breeds that we are bringing on board.
The new breeds are a hybrid of exotic and indigenous poultry species reared for both meat and eggs. Dr. Raphael Ayizanga is with the Department of Animal Science, UG.
We are going to try Sasso, Noela, Habad 1, Habad 2, and then Kuroila, which so the first phase we had Habad, which we mixed up, and then Kuroila. This time we are adding 3 more, the Sasso, the Noela, and we are going to separate the Habad into Habad 1 and 2. We are trying all these lines because they have been tried elsewhere and found to they have increased body weight. Weight at maturity has been much bigger than what we had, and then they are also laying more eggs. And we thought this one will give our farmers more money. What we have now, they are adapted more to our low input systems. Therefore, they don't give us as much as we want. And we want to move away from, as I said earlier, farming as a way of life to farming as a business or a model for poverty alleviation.
Ashanti Regional Livestock Officer Ajiman Prempo Fori is upbeat about the project's benefits for the region.
With this intermediate base, the little feed you give, the little care you give, it is also giving you the maximum yield you want. So they are, one, resilient to diseases, they can scavenge for feed, and the little feed you can support it with, you get your resource. So coming into the middle of the local chicken and the foreign chicken, I think this, of course, is going to help our local farmers make a headway in production.
A beneficiary of the first phase, Comfort Champoma, a poultry farmer at Achim Ejampoma, explains the project has improved her livelihood.
Nti aba mfiti ase no na eye den kakra but meton ye na menye ska no sande ehiem.
It wasn't easy initially, but I was able to make profits to invest into the business. I have more birds for sale in December.
Nti na me hu nchele me wo musa.
Okay, let's say profit
The trial is expected to be conducted across 7 regions under 3 agroecological zones, including the transitional, forest and coastal savanna zones. For Joy News, my name is Emmanuel Bright Kwawu.
It's been a while we did this. Up next, your money tip on Money Lab.
Hello and welcome to Money Lab. My name is Kofi Poli, Chief Operations Officer of People's Pension Trusts. We are continuing our pension tidbits on Money Lab. In our last episode, we looked at how 2 types of pensions. Today, we are going to look at reasons for having a pension plan. In fact, we are being told that by 2050, 1 in every 5 persons will be 60 years and above in developing countries. It is also a known fact that life expectancy is going up, and therefore there's a need for us to plan our life beyond our working life, and this is why we need to look at income security in our old age, and that's how CAM pension fits in. We will continue with our reasons in our next episode. Thank you for being with us.
All right, get up to date on the day's latest stories on myjoyonline.com/business. There you go. Bailout package, IMF Executive Board to meet in 3rd week of November. That's according to the Finance Minister. myjoyonline.com/business. We're back same time tomorrow.